All right, we are on Aleph Amud Beis 21b. After the Mishnah quoted Rabbi Akiva and his comments regarding women that prefer intimacy, even if it means a lower income rather than a greater income, but they'll have to forego intimacy. The Mishnah then quoted Rabbi Yeshua, who said another statement, which is the foolish chassid, the cunning wicked one, the one who feigns piety, like he self-inflicts pain to make people think that he's, and women who tries for celibacy, is mavali ha'olam. These are the ones that are like the wasteland of the world. So yesterday we discussed, at the end of our class yesterday, we discussed the foolish pious one. We explained that he's someone who takes his piety to such a degree that it ends up being detrimental to others. Oh, I'm sorry, you missed the class yesterday?
Yeah, I thought it was the birthday.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
I
watch the recording.
I didn't hear the announcement.
I'm sorry, so you can watch the recording. Yeah, sorry. So, right, so the foolish pious one yesterday we explained is someone who takes his piety to a degree that ends up being detrimental to others, and you completely miss the point of what he's supposed to be doing. And the scenario the Gemoro gives is a naked woman who's drowning, and the pious one says, "Oh, now let her look at women and lets her die." Taisvis cites the Yerushalmi, which gives a similar example: a baby drowning, and the pious guy says, "Oh, I got to take my tefillin off first." And by the time he takes his tefillin off, it's too late, God forbid. Jump in with your tefillin, and you'll deal with your tefillin later. You know, got to take my tefillin off first, then he's gonna save somebody else. So this is the foolish pious one. Takes his piety to such a degree, he takes himself so seriously at the point, as opposed to asking himself what's expected of me. He's taking himself so seriously. To the detriment of others. To the detriment. Yeah. Yeah. So Rabbi, someone quoted Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Someone told me a line in the name of Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who said the attitude of Chabad leadership and generally in serving Hashem is in some ways opposite to religious people, quote unquote. Religious people want to take themselves very seriously. And it makes sense because a lot of religion is built as a self-improvement system. Even within Yiddishkeit, there is this idea that Torah mitzvahs is meant for self-improvement. So a byproduct of that is to take oneself very seriously. You know, and you don't poke fun at your own religiosity because this is the whole thing. And in Chabad, we don't take ourselves seriously at all. We take the mission very seriously. It's subtle but very important distinction.
It's not all about us.
That's right. So that's why a chassid can make fun of himself a little bit. You know, by Fabrengen, he's not so concerned if a little self-deprecating humor, even if he's making fun of his own religiosity, as it were. But if you're talking about the mission, building, teaching, sharing, doing, reaching out, even the mitzvah, that's very serious. Myself, not so much. Next to Chassid Shaita, the foolish pious one is one who misses that. Takes himself so seriously, he completely missed the point. He's taking his piety so seriously that lets a woman drown. Because his piety is most important. Taking himself seriously instead of taking the mission seriously. It's a subtle but very important distinction. Okay, so today we get to the next one of these people who are Mavali Olam, the wasteland, the emptiness, the vanity of the world. And that is Rasha Arum, the wicked, cunning one. So it's not just that he's wicked. Someone who's wicked and we know he's wicked, good, he's wicked. we can easily identify there's a wicked one. The cunning wicked one is someone who's a little bit more conniving in his evil, and someone who's honest in his wickedness is easier to deal with than someone who's dishonest in his wickedness. Scheming and cunning and sly in that way, and sometimes sly to the degree that I'm not exactly breaking the law, but it's sly enough that what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah,
Right?
This is a big no-no in the law.
Even though in theory, maybe what he's doing is not exactly breaking the law. Now we're going to see that the first example the Gemoro gives actually is breaking the law. And Rashi points that out. But the rest of the examples aren't technically breaking the law, but it's sly. And it's interesting that Rashi specifically teaches that the first example the Gemara gives is breaking the law, whereas the other ones are not necessarily breaking the law. I think that requires a little bit of investigation. I'm sure some of the commentaries discuss it, but let's just go through the examples. So if you look at the narrow set of lines on Chapala from the Bays on 21b, we count 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up, and the third to last word is Heichidami Rasha'ar. What's kind of an example of the cunning or the naked? The word naked and cunning are the same word in Hebrew, as we mentioned a number of times here. Aron. What's an example of the cunning wicked one? So how many examples do we have? 4, maybe 5. Rabbi Yochanan says example number 1. Zaham Matim, I think that's how you pronounce the word, or Dvaro Ladayan, one who presents and explains his position to the judge, before his friend, the other litigant, presents his case before the judge. So 2 people are in some sort of dispute and they're coming before the court. Now, the law is that one cannot speak to the judge not in the presence of the other litigant, because otherwise the judge will have already thought of and reasoned in according with one litigant, and it makes it difficult to then see the other perspective. So you cannot present your case before the other. So this, says Rashi, is actually a violation of a prohibition, so Rashi says, which is why he's wicked. But the cunning here is that he didn't just break the law, but he broke the law in such a way that it makes it difficult to be undone. Because now he broke the law, that's one thing that makes him wicked. But the cunning here is that he made it difficult to undo it, because it's not going to be very difficult for the judge to unhear what he heard. Right? You can't unsee what you saw, you can't unhear what you heard. It's making it very difficult to the judge to unravel his thinking.
It's like when a lawyer knows that he's not allowed to present something to a jury. He does it anyway, even though he knows it's going to be over.
That's right. Even though the judge says
there's going to be a strong objection by the other side,
it doesn't matter.
The jury heard it already.
That's right. That's a good example. That's a good modern example.
Yeah.
Where a lawyer will present the case, will present evidence in the presence of the jury, even though he knows there's going to be an objection, and he knows the judge is going to say, "Please strike that from the record." It doesn't make a difference. The jury already heard it.
That's the line you have to. You can't. It's not admissible in court of law.
Right. That's right. So
The jury heard it.
That's right. So a similar thing here, where he presents his case to the judge. So it's wicked because it's breaking the law, and it's cunning because it makes it very difficult to undo. This is Rabbi Yochanan's view. As I mentioned, Rashi tells us that this first example of the cunning wicked is one who actually breaks the law. Now, the next examples, the person's not actually breaking the law, but he's just on the border there, where he, ruined, messes somebody else up. I didn't break the law. I found a loophole that makes it hard for another person. How's that? Rabbi Bo says, this is someone who gives a dinar to a poor person, and now that he gave him that dinar, which is a coin, this poor person now reaches the point where his total assets, or his total value, his total not assets, his total net worth is 200 zuz, which is another coinage. And now that he has 200 zuz, he's reached a threshold which halachically he's no longer considered poor. He's no longer considered poor. And this has relevant application. It's not because we learned. Mishesh, the Messiah Zuz, someone who has 200 Zuz in his account, he has 200 Zuz, this coinage. He can no longer collect that which is coming to the poor person. Specifically, 4 different things. There's leket shikha peya. This is a person who owns a field is required to leave behind things he forgets in the field. That's leket and shikha, 2 different types of forgetting. Right? You forget sheaves in the field, you forget stock in the field. So you say, yeah, the person has to leave them in the field, as well as the corners of his field, he has to leave a certain amount. The actual amount is only rabbinic, but a person has to leave a certain amount in the corner for the poor people to collect, as well as certain years during the 7-year cycle of Shemitah, a certain portion of the produce is to be given to the poor people. So a person has to qualify halachically, legally, as a poor person. So says the halacha, if the person has 200 zuz, he doesn't qualify as a poor person, and he can no longer collect these things. Now, this Mishnah text continues. If this poor person had two, he's 1 dinar shy of 200 zuz. So how much can he collect? Can he collect only 1 dinar? Because once he hits a dinar, now he's no longer poor. Says the Mishnah, no. If a poor person gave him 1,000 zuz in one shot, if I'm saying a rich person, gave him 1,000 zuz in one shot as part of these obligations that he has to give to the poor person, how days he can take? Because at the moment of his receiving that gift, he's below the poverty line, even though with that gift he's going to be way over the poverty line, he's going to get 1,000, right? He's only shy 1 dinar, and he gets 1,000 dinar. But because he's getting it in one shot, he's allowed to accept it. Because at the moment of receiving it, he's a poor person. So what does this cunning, wicked person do? Gives that guy 1 dinar. And now that they give him 1 dinar, he can't collect the other 999 because he's already out of the poverty line. So he didn't do anything halachically wrong. I'm giving the guy a gift. What do you want from me? I'm being stuck. I'm giving generous. But he screwed him. He turned him now. He took him out of the poverty line, and he can no longer collect anything else. And Rashi adds 1 line, which is interesting. Rashi says, why is he doing this? Because he has relatives that are poor people, and he wants them to get the leket shikha and peya and ma'aserani. He wants his relatives who are poor. They should get the poor man's tithe and the poor man's gifts. So anybody else who's poor, he gives them exactly the amount of money to make them no longer poor, so he can give to his family tons of money. That's what Rashi adds. Yeah, you're allowed to give to families that are poor.
For that year of tithing, if a poor person reaches the threshold within that year's tithe, he can't then diminish that portion underneath the 200 to then therefore.
I mean, if he spends the money,
like he could spend that dinner.
Yeah, in theory, yeah. The point is, at the moment,
like it doesn't make much.
at the moment of collection, how much does he have? That's the question. I'm pretty sure he's allowed to spend it.
So he's allowed to bring himself.
At the same time, the Bezdin has to most charity goes through the Bezdin, and the Bezdin can decide this guy is gaming the system and we won't give him. In theory, but that's not the point. The point is that halacha is the point of collection. If he doesn't have that money, he's legally poor. Right?
Yeah, okay.
Now,
Understand practically speaking.
Yeah. So Rashi adds this line that not just he's giving this. The Gemoro says he's giving this guy a dinar to make him no longer poor, so he can't collect anything else. Rashi adds that he does this because he wants to direct his that's right. He wants to direct his obligations to the poor to his own family. Right?
May need it more than this guy who's just.
Well, you need it more, not more. They're both poor, but he'd rather give it to his own family. And the halacha is you're allowed to give it to your own family. You're allowed to, right? But what's the cunning? So I think the reason why Rashi's adding this line is because here's the cunning. If he did it if he gave the poor guy a dinner to make him no longer poor, without the intention of giving the rest to people close relatives to him, and he's just being mean. He's just being wicked, playing it straight out. It's not cunning. The cunning here is he's trying to gain something by gaming some system, and he's gaining by giving it to his friend, to his family, or to his relatives, people he knows that he wants to give to. So he's ruining it for somebody else because he wants to gain something else. And there's the cunning part of it. I think that's why Rashi's adding that line, to add to the cunning nature of it. Not just that he's wicked. In other words, the Mishnah, Rabbi Shua is specifically speaking not just to wicked people, people who are just straight out wicked. He's talking to people who convince themselves they're not wicked because they're not doing anything wrong. So how does he convince himself he's not wicked? Because he says, look, I'm giving it to other people anyway. I'm giving it to my friends, my family. And that's why it's cunning. It's so cunning that he's even fooling himself. Is the point. I think that's the point here. Not just he's ruining it for other people in a kind of malevolent, malicious intent. He convinces himself there's no malicious intent here. Because I got to take care of my family. But in the meantime, anybody else is poor, I'm going to stop them from collecting anything because I want to make sure my family is doing well. And he convinces himself I'm doing the right thing because I'm making sure I'm taking care of my family. I think that's the point of the cunning wicked. Not just that he's cunning and ruining it for others, but he convinces himself that he's okay. And that's why it's such a difficult thing to come out of. It's similar to the chassid shaita, the pious fool. It's hard to get out of it. He's so stuck in his own head with his piety that he doesn't even see what he did wrong by letting the woman drown. Same thing here. He's so convinced himself that what he's doing is right because of his cunning that he can't even see past it and get out of his wickedness. And I think that's the examples, all the things that Yeshua talks about. It's not just the wickedness that exists out there in the, just regular wickedness. There's lots of regular wickedness. It's specifically the kind of wickedness or foolishness that the person who's going through it doesn't even see out of it. A person who outright steals, he knows he's doing the wrong thing.
Well, I think,
right? So it's easy to see you're wicked, and I accept it. I'm wicked, but I don't care. But this guy, that's right. He convinces himself he's not stealing. He convinces himself he's not a bad guy, just like the pious fool who, I'm pious. What do you mean? I'm not touching naked women. I'm very pious. He can't even see past his own foolishness. So same thing here. The guy can't even see past his own wickedness. And that's why I think Rashi adds that it's not like he's not giving charity. He's giving charity, but he wants to give it in such a way that it takes care of people he wants to. So he can't even see past his own wickedness and how he's messing over other people. That's what I think is happening here. It's the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, told his son, the previous Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe, he told his son, is it in Hayim? I can't remember, but this is the teaching he told him. He said, God, you're not fooling. Other people, you're not fooling either. They see past it. The only one you're fooling is yourself. So what did you do? You fooled a fool. Right? You fooled yourself, and you're the fool who fooled yourself. That's kind of what this guy's doing. He's fooling himself into thinking that he's doing the right thing. And that's why it's cunning. He can't see past it. Not just cunning against other people, but even cunning to his own self. Like the pious fool can't even see past his own foolishness because he's so stuck in his own piety. Perhaps.
I don't know if I would do, I went through the same thing. My ex-wife was like this. It happened that she lost everything she had. And I could give. I was sitting in shul one day and somebody's opening a Chabad house and he's asking for donations. I'd rather give it to my wife.
Yeah.
You know?
So in that case, you're choosing where to give your tzedakah. That's the worst thing. This person is ruining it for someone else in order to get to other people.
it would have been
It's
better.
the expense. It would have been better not to give the guy. Exactly. It would have been better not to give that. Exactly. Exactly. It would have been better not to give this poor guy at all. It ruins it for him. Now you can no longer collect anything. That's right.
I should always spend it there and be in the poverty line.
Okay, that's that guy's choice, but it's very difficult to do that. You're expecting someone to. I'm sure there are poor people who might do
I
that.
don't know what a dinner was
Sure.
worth in those days.
I don't know, but it's very difficult to live such a lifestyle where you're constantly fighting to keep yourself below the poverty line. I don't remember. Okay, so let's see the next example of one more example. Okay, let's see maybe one or two more examples of the cunning wicked one who convinces himself he's not doing anything wrong. That's what I think it means. It could be a me just cunning against other people, but I'm adding this layer that it's. If he's being honest, he has to know. But people talk themselves into all kinds of things.
I would say foolish, maybe, the way to describe him, if he had no intent of what he was doing. But cunning seems intent.
There's the Torah says, right? Hashoiched ya'aver einei chacham. Bribe blinds the wise, right? Hashoiched ya'aver einei chacham. Blind. 1 second. Exactly. But even chachamim, Torah refers to this one as a chacham, a sage. not just a sage in knowledge, but in piety as well. He's a judge. He's a venerable judge, for real. By Torah standards, he's an amazing person. And he too, Torah says that the shaykhad, bribes will blind him. And the Gemara comments that the worst part is that you don't even know that you're being blinded. You say, "Oh, I'm not biased," but it's so deep down you don't even realize you're being blinded, because you're automatically going towards bias because you had that. So this is like a self-serving shaykhad. That's like I'm bribing myself, and the bribe to the self is so deep down that it's hard to see past it.
But I think the person who's engaged in that kind of illegality knows
He's not doing anything
he has
illegal,
to-
technically
he has to
speaking.
convince himself that he's not,
That's right.
but he knows deep down he's not doing right.
We all do it. We all convince ourselves that what we're doing is right, and we know we're not. We do it all the time. Maybe not in such an extreme example of
I can't say he's not aware.
we all do this. Maybe not the extreme example of messing over somebody else, but we all tell ourselves when we do certain things that it's not such a big deal, whatever, I didn't mean it, I this, I that. But if you sit down honestly, no, you all do it to one degree or another. It's part of the human condition. Al kol pshoim techasa ava. On all sins, love conceals. You love yourself, so or adam karev etzel atzmai. The person is close to himself, and therefore he convinces himself of all kinds of things. This is we have this all over Scripture and the Gemara. This idea that a person shouldn't trust himself in some ways because we convince ourselves of all kinds of things to justify our behavior, and I think that's what's going on here. I mean, this is an extreme example of it because he's messing over somebody else, but perhaps it's still what's behind this. Okay, one more example. Rabbi said, another example of the cunning wicked one. Zahamatzi Eitza, this is someone who gives advice to someone else to sell assets when they have very little assets. So what's the scenario? The scenario is as follows. The Rabbi Asi taught the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Yisaymin, if poor people,
So your goat.
one second. Yisaymin is orphans. Let me explain the background before I read this. So the halacha is like this. When a person dies, right, there are laws to inheritance, right? Torah laws to inheritance. And the inheritance goes to the sons. That's the halacha. Now, the person who died also has obligations outside of his inheritance. Let's say he owes money or whatnot. Even if he doesn't owe money, he certainly has an obligation to provide for his wife, who's now becoming a widow, as well as for his daughters, even though they're not part of the inheritance. So the estate that's inherited becomes responsible for these obligations to provide for his widow, his wife, Iksuba, and to provide for the daughters. Now, depending on what obligation we're talking about, there's different kinds of assets that we can use to pay for these obligations. Now, the law is that there's two laws. Number one is that the daughters collect their not inheritance. It's they collect their livelihood from the estate only from real estate assets, but not from cash assets. Sorry? Cash, not from cash assets. That's law number one. Law number the estate is responsible to pay for the daughter's livelihood, right? Not inheritance per se, but they're supposed to get it's what's called mezainos.
From real estate.
That's right. So they only collect their livelihood from real estate assets, not from other assets, not from cash or even like movable objects. That's right. So only from real estate assets. This is the law. Now the other law is like this.
Not chattel.
That's right. Another law is like this. If the father leaves behind lots of assets, yeah, so the sons inherit those big assets, and they use those assets, the real estate assets, to give to generate income for the daughters, the sisters. Now, if there's little assets, not a lot of real estate assets, so there's not enough for the sons to inherit and to provide for the daughters. So what's the law? The law is the assets go exclusively to pay for the daughters.
So they get priority.
They get priority. And the sons, the language is, Yishol psachim, let them go collect money at door to door. This is the law, but that it's
So they
more,
finagled the system
one
here
second, it's
somehow.
more denigrating
Right.
for a woman to go collect alms than for a guy to collect alms. So if there's not enough assets to give an inheritance plus provide for the daughters take the assets, the real estate assets, and the sons go collecting from
So let's say there's no real estate, so they can collect the money in that instance. Whatever is inheritable in that situation goes to the daughters, including not just real estate assets, but any assets, right? Money and
it seems like
all-
only it seems only real estate. Let's just assume that. I'm not.
Oh,
My mind isn't in that sugya right now. I'm only just relative to this conversation, but I don't remember the law in that regard. But this is the
It
point.
would seem so, because otherwise they would have to be
Yeah.
going door to door for collect alms. And just the whole point of this whole
Right.
discussion is that.
So the real right. So now the laws of this. So it says like this. Now, Rabbi Asi taught in Rabbi Yechanan. Yesoimim, orphans, the sons, shekadmu machar b'nechasim matim. Before they came to the Bezdin, where the Bezdin says, okay, you got to take these assets and give it to the daughters so that they can provide for their livelihood. Before they had a chance to do that, the sons went ahead and sold the assets.
Right. They liquidated
So they
it.
liquidated it. So the law is masha machar b'machar. That which they sold is a legit sale. Because usually the law is if you sell something against, let's say the father owed money to the bank, let's say, or the father owed $1 million.
Yeah, debts.
He has debt. Now this debt predates the death of the father. So when the sons inherit the property and they sell it,
There's already a lien.
there's already a lien on the original loan. So the father's debtors can go and take even though he sold it.
Right.
But when it comes to daughters, when does their
Rights.
rights begin? Only after death. So there's like a moment when the sons own the assets because they're inheritors before they're responsible to give to the daughters. So if they sell it off, their sale is a good sale. And now there's no more assets and the daughter's left with nothing and the sons have
Does there have to be a lien involved for the sons to do that? Or if it just
no,
goes straight
no,
out
if
sale?
there's a lien, then the people who have the lien can
Well,
collect
that's
it.
Yeah.
So there's no
Okay,
lien.
straight up sale.
It's right, straight up sale. In other words, the daughter's obligation, the daughter's right to collect income from the real estate assets only begins after the inheritance. And because it begins after the inheritance, the sons can sell it.
Right.
This is how Tosfos explains.
So they got it, it's a loophole around the.
That's right.
priority to
So
the
it says,
daughters.
that's right. So it says Rabbi Yechanan, this is the conniving wicked one.
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure.
He goes to
You know
this,
why they
he
did it.
goes to the sons and says, okay, before you go to Bezdin,
Before dad dies, man, we gotta.
but as soon as dad dies, before you go to Bezdin and they tell you to give it to your sisters, go sell that stuff and you'll have all the cash and your sisters will be left starving.
What if
So in
they-
theory, he's not breaking any law.
Right.
But this is the conniving wicked one. I'm going to add one more thing, which is interesting, which is Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say that the orphans are the wicked ones. He says the wicked ones are somebody else who advises the wicked ones, the inheritors, to do this.
Their lawyer or whomever.
That's right. It's mamish conniving. The sons who just lost their father, they're in a vulnerable state. And you call them wicked because they sold something. They're desperate also. They're desperate, number one, and they're vulnerable state. They just lost their father. It's the lawyer, it's the advisor who's cunning and scheming to, maybe he'll cut in on the deal or something.
Of course he's gonna cut it.
Of course, he's going to get. I want a commission for this fantastic advice. That's the wicked one who advises people in a vulnerable state to do something that, in other words, if the brothers were thinking straight, they weren't in a vulnerable state. They might have said, "I'm sorry, I care for my sisters. I want to provide for them."
Yeah.
But the cunning one is the other guy.
They may not even know the law.
They don't even realize the law.
They know the law.
They might not even know.
Sisters are gonna be cut out.
That's right. The cunning one is the guy who cold and calculated, manipulates a vulnerable person to mess over somebody else.
Unless they did know, and then they are culpable.
Well,
But even though technically speaking, it's not illegal. Right?
Not
This is
evil.
but this is cunning evil.
Yeah.
This is the example number What was example number 3?
Three.
Right, the first example was presenting your case before the judge before
Yeah,
the other litigant
take
comes.
down.
Number 2 is making a poor guy no longer poor by exactly making him no longer poor, so that way he can give away his gifts to somebody else. Example number 3 is advising inheritors to sell off assets so that the sisters don't come collecting.
Yeah,
The sisters can't come collecting.
We can hire a lawyer.
Yeah, but this is
Rather
technically the
than
law.
this.
This is technically the law. Okay.
very interesting one.
Yeah. See, all of these things have a little star at the side telling us to look at the halacha. So I wonder if these things are actually illegal.
In Torah law, you mean?
Yeah, but I don't think so. I don't think so. Because these things are only about whatever.
But it's stealing. It's really stealing.
They're still deemed wicked.
But not technically.
Not
Because all
technically.
it's legal stealing.
It can be deemed
That's what
wicked.
makes him a cunning evil. Because he's just in the line there where he's messing over somebody else, but convince himself that he's not doing anything wrong.
These are examples of being wicked, but yet not breaking the law.
That's right, which is why I'm saying that it's interesting that in the first case, where the person presents his case to the judge, Rashi points out that he actually is in violation of
That one,
prohibition.
yeah.
So that one's interesting that he's actually in violation. The other ones, I don't think, at least, maybe I'm wrong. If someone's watching and knows differently, please tell us. But it seems to me that the other ones are not breaking the law. He's just using the law to manipulate it, to mess somebody else
Doing
over.
an end run around it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have a few more examples coming, God willing. So tomorrow, again, I'm not here. I'm going away for Shabbos. I'll be back on Sunday. So Monday morning, we will continue with some more examples of the cunning, wicked guy.
We have to.
My mother-in-law is coming in from Australia,
Oh,
and to come into Canada is too difficult. So we're going to go into the States, spend Shabbos upstate New York.
that's nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Swan Lake, yeah. Okay, wonderful day and a good Shabbos, I guess.
So she's going to hike.